Please like, share, and subscribe. Wishing you happiness and good luck every day.
Okay, what if I told you that pretty much everything you've ever learned about getting rich is just plain wrong? Today, we're diving straight into Alex Becker's The 10 Pillars of Wealth to really get inside the mindsets that separate the super wealthy from, well, everyone else. And fair warning, the very first lesson is probably going to make you a little uncomfortable. Richard Branson just hits the nail on the head with this one. And this isn't just some feel-good quote for a poster. The book argues this is the first pillar of wealth. You know, if your financial goals don't make your stomach do a little flip, you're simply not thinking big enough. It forces us to ask a really tough question about the path we're all on. I mean, really think about it. The whole 40-year plan, right? Go to a good school, land a safe job, save a little bit here and there. We're all taught this is the smart, responsible thing to do. But what if it's the biggest financial trap of all? That's the huge, provocative idea Alex Becker wants us to wrestle with right from the start. Becker has a name for this. He calls it the Great Wealth Fly. It's this poisonous idea that to build real wealth, you've got to be a genius or get incredibly lucky or maybe even be a little bit crooked. He says the absolute first step on this whole journey is to just completely demolish that belief. And he gives us a fantastic way to reframe the entire challenge. This is a total game changer. See, most of us are taught to see wealth creation as a slot machine. It's just pure luck. You pull the lever, cross your fingers, and hope for the best. Becker says, no way. Building wealth is a video game. It has rules. It takes skill. You might be awful when you first pick up the controller, but you can learn the patterns, you can level up, and eventually you can master it. The power is completely in your hands. All right, so if getting wealthy is a skill we can learn, what's the first big myth we need to just throw in the trash? Oh, it's the biggest one of all. This idea that the slow, safe path is the smart one. Now look, this is meant to be provocative, right? Becker isn't actually trying to insult your family. He's trying to shake you awake. The conventional wisdom, that safe advice we all get, he argues it's trapped millions of people in what he calls traffic fighter road, just grinding away at a job they can barely stand, all for a retirement that might not even be there for them. And here's the great paradox. We're told the get-rich-slow plan is low risk. But in reality, it's the biggest gamble you can take. You are literally betting your entire financial future on things you have zero control over. Your boss's mood, your company's stock price, the global economy. You're just hoping nothing goes wrong for 40 years. How is that safe? And what's the price you pay for taking this massive gamble? 71%. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's 5 out of every 7 days. It is the vast majority of your youngest, healthiest, best years, traded away for a promise that's looking shakier every single day. Okay, the second huge myth we need to bust is one you've heard a million times. Time is money. For the people who are truly wealthy, this just isn't true at all. I mean, think about a crazy example like Jordan Belfort. The stories say the guy spent most of his time partying, right? But his company was making an insane amount of money. How is that possible? Because he wasn't trading his hours for dollars. He had built a system that made money for him, whether he was at his desk or not. His income was totally disconnected from his time. And that leads us to the secret weapon of the wealthy, building what Becker calls a machine. This isn't about working harder. It's about creating a system, a business, an investment, a digital product that generates income for you 24/7. Your machine is on the clock, so you don't have to be. And building this machine, it's not some kind of magic. It's really a 3-step process. First, you find something that works, a process that reliably creates value. Second, you clone that process. You automate it with software or you delegate it to other people. The whole goal is to make it run without you having to be there. And finally, and this part is absolutely crucial, you step back. You use your new free time to grow the machine, not to be just another cog running inside of it. So look, busting these old myths is a huge step, but it's not enough. You have to replace them with a powerful new core belief, and that's what he calls the winner's mindset. Let's just be brutally honest with ourselves for a second. To become a millionaire, you have to be in the top 1% of earners. So you have to look in the mirror and ask, do I really, truly believe I have what it takes to outperform 99 other smart, hungry people? This isn't about being arrogant or cocky. It's about having the audacity to be ambitious. The third pillar is all about accepting a simple, hard truth. If you want extraordinary results in your life, you can't just be okay with being good. You have to aim for incredible. And you know what? It all boils down to this simple, unbreakable chain. It always starts with belief. Believing you can be incredible is what gives you permission to take the massive, scary actions that are required. And it's only that level of action that will ever get you the results you're chasing. Belief fuels action. Action creates results. That's it. That's the formula. So we've smashed the old myths, we've laid out the new truths, and now you're basically standing at a fork in the road. You have a choice to make. So let's just lock in these key takeaways. Number 1, the so-called safe path is actually a massive gamble. Number 2, your main goal is to build a machine that completely separates your time from your income. 3, you have to have the ambition, the belief that you can be in the top 1%. And 4, the most important one, it all starts with what you believe, because that belief controls your actions, and your actions, well, they determine your entire life. So the real question I want to leave you with is this. You know the mindsets now. You know the difference between the two paths. But just knowing it isn't enough, is it? What's the very first action, no matter how small it seems, that you are going to take today to prove which path you're on?
All right, today we're going to dive into an idea that pretty much challenges everything you've ever been told about how to build wealth. Seriously, this little explainer might just flip the script on how you think about your career, your money, and your future.
So let's just kick things off with this bombshell. This is a direct quote from our source material, and, it doesn't pull any punches. It's designed to make you stop and really question the advice you've probably heard your entire life.
And really, that leads us right to the heart of it all. This is the central question we're exploring today. We're all told, play it safe, follow the rules, climb the ladder. But what if that script, the one that promises you security, is actually the single riskiest bet you could possibly make with your life?
To make this super clear, let's just look at two completely different lives. On one side, you've got the traffic fighter. Their day is just dictated. The 8 a.m. bumper-to-bumper traffic, the 9-to-5 grind, it's all controlled by someone else. Then you've got this other life. Waking up to play video games, taking the Ferrari for a spin at 10 a.m., a life dictated by choice. That's the core conflict we're going to unpack right now.
So let's start by breaking down the path that most people are on, the get-rich-slow plan. You know the one. It's supposed to be the safe, secure, reliable way to do things, but is it really? Let's play this out. Best case scenario. You work your butt off, you climb the ladder, you save like crazy. After 30 long years, you could have $1.8 million. Now, on paper that sounds pretty great, doesn't it? But what are you really trading for that number? Well, here's the price tag. 30 years. We're talking 3 decades of your one and only life traded away for the chance to be what the author calls a sort of millionaire when you're old. And that word maybe, well, that's a pretty big maybe. Because let's get real about the cracks in the foundation of this supposedly safe plan. Your whole 30-year journey depends on none of this stuff ever happening. You don't get laid off, your company doesn't go under, the economy never tanks. How many of these things can you actually control? Yeah, pretty much zero. And this analogy, man, it just nails it. The slow path is like spending 30 years of your life meticulously building a roof, board by board, while there's praying, hoping that it never ever rains. But the longer you build, the more chances there are for a storm to come along and just wash the whole thing away. But, the risk here isn't just about the money. Not even close. Maybe the biggest, truest cost of this safe path is what it does to your actual life, day in and day out, for all those years.
Let's just put a number on it. If you work 5 out of 7 days a week, that's 71%. That's how much of your life, during your best, most vibrant years, you are handing over for a future that isn't even a sure thing. When you see it as a percentage like that, the sacrifice is kind of staggering. And what does living inside that 71% actually feel like? Well, a lot of the time it feels like this. It's a life of settling. A life where your choices are never truly your own. They're dictated by your boss, your schedule, and your bank account. You're always just putting your real dreams on hold for someday. Okay, so if the safe path is actually a huge gamble, then what's the alternative? Well, let's explore what our source calls the get-rich-quick method. And to be crystal clear, we are not talking about lottery tickets here. Not at all. The argument is that this is a controllable system. It's hard for sure, and it takes massive effort, but it puts you in the driver's seat. And this right here is the whole game. You have to understand the difference between good risk and bad risk. Bad risk is what we just talked about, putting your entire future in the hands of your boss or the stock market. Good risk is different. It's calculated. It's betting on the one and only thing you can actually, truly control, yourself.
So, what could this path actually look like? Well, here's one example from the source. Notice the key parts here. You don't just rage quit your job. No, you start small. You experiment. You manage your risk. And here's the most important part. You expect to fail. This path isn't easy. It's built on learning from those failures because every single one gets you closer until one success, just one, changes everything. Then you can go all in and really scale it up. To even attempt something like this, you've got to totally shift your mindset. It's all built on these core beliefs. First, that you are in control. Second, that you can learn and get better. Third, and this is huge, that failure is not the end. It's just part of the process. And maybe the best one, unlike a job where you have to be right every single day, in this game, you only have to get it right once. It's about resilience, not perfection.
Okay, so now let's put it all together. Let's look at these two philosophies, these two paths, right next to each other. Where does the risk really lie?
I mean, this table pretty much says it all, doesn't it? The slow path trades away your time and your control for a pretty limited reward way down the road. The quick path? It demands intense focus, sure, and some temporary sacrifice, but the reward is total freedom, years, maybe even decades sooner. It's about redefining risk from something that happens to you to something you actually manage. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to a choice, and it's a really profound choice about how you value your time, your freedom, and your own potential.
This quote from the source really just captures the entire spirit of this way of thinking. Hard times, financial struggles, they're temporary as long as you believe you have the power to change your situation. It's a mindset of empowerment, not being a victim of your circumstances.
So we'll end with this question. After looking at all the unpredictable, uncontrollable risks of the traditional path, the whole argument here is that the safest, lowest risk investment you can possibly make is in yourself. So the only question left is, are you willing to make that bet? All right, today we're going to tear down a piece of advice you probably heard your entire life. We're going to look at a totally different way to think about building wealth, a way the truly rich have figured out. Let's dive in. Time is money. We've all had this hammered into our heads, right? It's like rule number 1. The idea is simple. The more hours you grind, the more money you make. It's supposed to be the bedrock of a good work ethic. But what if I told you that for the people who are genuinely wealthy, that phrase is a complete and utter myth? What if the real secret isn't about trading more of your precious time for a few more dollars, but about something else entirely?
So let's just blow this whole myth wide open. And to do that, we don't need some boring theory. We have a perfect and kind of notorious real-world example. I'm calling it the Wolf of Wall Street test.
Yep, that Jordan Belfort. If you've seen the movie, you know the deal. His life was just this insane whirlwind of pure excess. The huge majority of his time was spent doing anything but work. We're talking wild parties, yachts, you name it. By his own admission, he was barely functional a lot of the time.
And yet, while all that chaos was happening, he was pulling in what would be, today, over $100 million a year. So how on earth is that possible if time is money? The math just doesn't work. It makes no sense.
Well, here's the big secret. His income wasn't tied to the hours he personally put in. Not at all. It came from a system he created, this deadly effective sales pitch that he basically cloned by teaching it to hundreds of brokers who were making calls for him around the clock. He didn't work in the machine. He built the machine.
Belfort's crazy story really brings us to this huge fork in the road. You see, if you're stuck in that time is money trap, where your income is directly tied to the hours you work, you really only have 2 ways to make more money, but one of them has a very low ceiling. So here are the 2 paths. On the left, you've got choice 1. Basically, run faster on the hamster wheel. Become so good at what you do, like a top surgeon or a superstar athlete, that your time is worth a fortune. On the right, you have choice 2. Get off the hamster wheel entirely. Build a machine that separates your income from your time. One is always limited by the clock. The other can grow and grow. Let's be real for a second. Choice 1 is a trap for almost everyone.
The source material puts it pretty bluntly. Most of us just aren't genetically gifted enough to be the absolute best in the world at something. And you know what? Even if you are, your income is still capped by the hours in a day and by what someone else, your boss, your clients, decides you're worth.
So, since choice one is basically a dead end for creating true wealth, let's talk about the real game changer, building your own machine. This is where the whole idea of passive income becomes absolutely critical.
This right here is the Holy Grail. It's about creating a system that makes money for you whether you're actively working or not. It's income that works for you so you don't have to. And when we say machine, don't just picture some, factory robot. A machine can be a piece of software that sells the digital product. It can be an automated e-commerce website. Or, just like Jordan Belford, it can be a team of people you've trained to perfectly replicate a process that works.
Now, to really see how this plays out, let's look at this story of two marketers. We'll call them Joe and Nick. They both start out crazy successful, making the exact same amount of money. But their approach, it's night and day. Joe is your classic solopreneur, the grinder, doing everything himself. Nick, he's a system builder from the get-go.
And just look at the difference in leverage. Joe, working himself to the absolute bone, can only squeeze out 360 hours a month. That's his physical limit. But Nick and his team, they're putting in a combined 1,200 hours of expert work. It's not even a fair fight.
And here is the final outcome. This is where the two paths really diverge. Joe hits a wall. He can't grow anymore, and he becomes a complete slave to his business. And because it can't run without him, it's basically unsellable. It's worthless as an asset. Nick, on the other hand, scales his business to the moon. And because he built it to run without him, he can sell it for an absolutely life-changing amount of money.
Okay, this all sounds amazing, right? But how do you actually apply this thinking to your own life, to your own ideas? Let's get practical. Here's a simple time-free checklist you can run any business idea through.
All right, question number one, and this is the big one. Can this business make money while you are not physically there? Does it have the potential to bring in cash even if you're on a beach with no cell service? If the answer is no, you're not building a machine, you're just building yourself a new job.
Next up, think about the actual work involved. Can the core processes be automated with software? And if not, could you write down the process so clearly that you could hire and train someone else to do it just as well as you? The goal here is to make yourself redundant from the day-to-day grind.
Okay, this one's the real gut check. Let's say your business becomes a huge success. Could you create a step-by-step operations manual, train a manager, and confidently walk away for a month? If the whole thing would fall apart without you, you don't own a business, you own a job.
And finally, the million-dollar question. Literally, can this thing grow from making $100 to $1 million without you having to work 10 times harder? If serving more customers means you personally have to put in more hours, it's not a scalable machine. A true asset can grow exponentially without your time growing alongside it.
Now hold on. This is a super important reality check. Building the machine is hard work. In fact, it's often more time-intensive at the start than just doing everything yourself. But here's the key difference. Every hour you put in is building towards freedom, not just locking you into another paycheck.
So after all that, what's the one thing you really need to take away from this? If you forget everything else, just remember this one core idea. It's how you finally take back your time.
This is it. This is the whole game. From the richest person on the planet to you and me, everyone gets the same 24 hours in a day. The wealthy don't magically find more time. They just find ways to disconnect their income from their time. They use their money to buy back their freedom.
And that really just leaves us with one final thought. As you look at your career, your goals, your business ideas, ask yourself this really simple question. Are you building a better paying cage for yourself, or are you building a machine that will set you free? The answer to that question will define your future.
All right, today we're unpacking a really powerful and, let's be honest, kind of provocative argument from our source material. It's about what might be the single most important belief you need to achieve extraordinary wealth. And it's an idea that really challenges everything we think we know about skills, talent, and having the right idea. So, to get our heads around this, let's start with a little thought experiment the author walks us through. I want you to imagine you're sitting in a NASCAR, okay? You're on the starting grid, you can feel the engine rumbling through your entire body, and the roar of the crowd is just this massive wall of sound. Now, in this scenario, the deck is completely stacked in your favor. You've got the most advanced car on the track, the absolute best pit crew in the business, and get this, you even have a secret, illegal 2-mile-per-hour advantage. By every single metric, you are set up to win this thing. But there's a catch, a huge one. Despite all of these incredible advantages, deep down, you just don't see yourself as a winner. You feel kind of like an imposter. You're scared to really push the car to its limits. You know, scared to take those risks that the champions always take. So this brings us to the crucial question the author poses. When that moment comes, when the race is on the line, and you have to make that risky, split-second move to take first place, are you going to do it? If you don't truly believe you're the best driver out there, will you act like you are? Well, according to the source, the answer is a hard no. Not a chance. You're going to play it safe. You'll brake a little earlier into the turns, you'll avoid those tight gaps, and you'll end up finishing somewhere in the middle of the pack. Your mindset, your belief about yourself just completely canceled out every single advantage you had.
Okay, so that whole NASCAR story, it's not really about racing, is it? The author's making a much bigger point. It's a perfect metaphor for creating wealth. It is a competition, and how you see yourself is going to determine exactly how you play the game.
And just to put this into perspective, becoming a millionaire in the United States puts you in roughly the top 1.1% of all households. Think about that. For every one person who makes it, there are 99 who don't. It is, by its very definition, an elite competition. And this right here, this is the absolute core of the argument. Your skills, your tools, even your brilliant ideas, they're all secondary. The author argues that if you don't have this fundamental, unshakable belief that you are elite and that you deserve to win, you will simply never take the big risks or make the bold moves needed to get into that top 1%. The source actually boils this down into a really simple, powerful system. It's not magic, it's just a clear chain of events. Your beliefs, they directly dictate your actions, and your actions are what ultimately create your results. BLR. It's that straightforward. Now, to make this idea crystal clear, the source gives us a great side-by-side comparison. It shows how two very different mindsets handle the exact same challenges in business. Just look at the difference here. The challenge is identical for both. Make software. The person with the average belief sees a dead end. I don't know how to code. But the person who believes they're destined for the 1%, they see a problem to be solved. I can learn, or I can pay someone who does. One person makes an excuse, the other takes action. And the author really doesn't mince words about this. The claim is that this belief is so powerful, it's the ultimate trump card. They say an average person with an average idea who absolutely believes they must succeed will act, while a genius who's filled with self-doubt will just hesitate and, in the end, fail. So, does this really hold up in the real world? Is this just some motivational fluff? Well, the source provides a pretty dramatic case study to back it all up, and it's about a friend of the author who literally started with nothing. So, meet Tom. This guy didn't have a fancy business degree or a background in Silicon Valley. He was a high school dropout with zero business experience, but he had this burning, unwavering desire to be an entrepreneur. 8. That's how many businesses Com started that went completely bankrupt. 8 failures in a row. Each one left him in a worse spot than before. By any conventional way of looking at it, his track record was an absolute disaster. So now he's on his 9th attempt, a gambling business, and he gets hit with a potential catastrophe. New government regulations are about to shut his entire operation down unless he can raise a huge amount of capital, like immediately. He needed to find over £1 million. That's a massive sum for anyone, let alone a guy with a history of 8 bankrupt businesses and basically no assets to his name. And predictably, right, every single investor turned him down flat. I mean, who would invest in someone with a 0 for 8 record? He gets physically thrown out of his final last-ditch meeting. He's at rock bottom. So what does a person do when they believe that failure just is not an option? He did what most of us would think is completely impossible. He walked into a random office building and literally just started knocking on doors, pitching anyone who would give him a minute. And it worked. Just hours before the deadline, he secured the investment. A few years later, he sold his stake in that company for hundreds of millions. So how can you actually apply this? The author says it's not about just thinking positively. It's about using a very specific mental tool to force yourself to take a different action when you're facing down an obstacle. So whenever you're up against a problem and your first thought is, oh, I can't do that, you're supposed to stop and ask yourself this. And it's a deliberately over-the-top question. It's meant to break the pattern of your own self-doubt. See, this question is designed to just completely bypass your excuses. A freak of nature genius doesn't say I can't. They just find a way. So asking this forces you to identify that way. It shifts your focus away from the obstacle and onto the necessary action. I can't code becomes, okay, so I must learn how to code. And that really brings us to the final takeaway from this source. The whole argument is that the single biggest thing holding most people back isn't their lack of skill or their lack of a good idea. It's the absence of a belief that they are even capable of being great. That belief, it's not a substitute for hard work, but it might just be the psychological engine that makes all of it possible in the first place.
All right, let's dive into something that might be a little tough to swallow. It's a powerful concept for building wealth that comes from one of our favorite sources, and the idea is this. Everything that happens to you is 100% your fault. Yeah, I know, it's a heavy one, but the argument here is that this mindset is the absolute key to taking back control of your life.
So just a quick heads up, the source material we're pulling from today uses a really extreme, kind of tragic story to hammer its point home. The goal isn't to be insensitive, not at all. It's to illustrate a core principle about responsibility in a way that you just can't forget. So let's just approach this with an open mind, okay?
So let me introduce you to a guy named Steven. And by all accounts, Steven is the perfect guy. I mean, he's a youth pastor, has a loving family, the whole white picket fence dream. He's the type of person who doesn't drink, doesn't curse, just known for being a genuinely good dude.
Okay, so here's the scene. It's late one night, midnight to be exact. His daughter gets sick at a sleepover, and like any good dad would, he gets in the car to go pick her up. It's just a simple, responsible act of a loving parent.
He hops in the car and takes the route he always takes. But here's a really interesting detail from the source. This route passes an IHOP. And you know what IHOP is like after the bars close, right? It's a total magnet for college students. This is a subtle but really crucial piece of the story.
So he gets to this intersection, and it has a known blind spot. He does exactly what you or I would do. He stops, he looks both ways, doesn't see anyone coming, and he pulls out. He's following all the rules, doing everything right.
And then, in a split second, the absolute unthinkable happens. A drunk student in a massive truck going 100 miles an hour comes flying around that blind spot. There was just no time to react.
The result is catastrophic, immediate. Steven and his daughter die on impact. And the drunk driver? He walks away with just a bump on his head.
So this brings us to the central, absolutely gut-wrenching question of the story. Whose fault was it? I mean, the obvious answer is the drunk driver, right? Case closed.
But then, the source hits you with this just shocking conclusion. It argues that it was Steven's fault, and even more importantly, that he could have prevented it. Now, this is the pivot point for this entire way of thinking we're exploring today.
Okay, let's be super clear here, because I know this feels completely wrong. We are not talking about legal blame. Legally, 100%, the drunk driver's at fault. This is about a mindset shift, a shift away from blame and towards control. You know, we can point fingers at the driver, throw him in jail, ruin his life. But does any of that change what happened to Steven and his daughter? The cold, hard truth presented here is that Steven's the one who paid the ultimate price. Assigning blame doesn't bring them back.
And this really boils down to two totally different mindsets. You've got the victim mentality, which says it's someone else's fault. And when you do that, you give up all your power. Then there's the ownership mentality, which says it's my fault. And yeah, that's painful, but it's the only thing that gives you the power to change the outcome.
So, what if Steven had adopted this ownership mindset? What if he'd thought, okay, it's midnight, I'm near a spot that I know is packed with drunk drivers, if something bad happens, it's on me. Well, look at what he could have done. He could have tried to convince his daughter to just tough it out till morning. He could have avoided that specific route entirely. He could have just assumed a reckless driver was hiding in that blind spot and waited an extra few seconds. Or he could have just taken a different, safer route home. Paranoid? Maybe a little. But would he be alive? Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears and see how this mindset applies to the world of business, where fault almost always comes with a pretty hefty price tag. Because this isn't just about life and death scenarios, it's about the financial health of every single thing you build.
The author actually shares a story from his own life. And this is the price he paid for not taking 100% responsibility. $20,000 in unfulfilled orders.
So here's what happened. An employee messed up, big time. When he's confronted, what does he do? He blames the system, blames the software, blames anything but himself. So yeah, he gets fired. But who eats the $20,000 loss? Not him. The business owner does. The owner pays the price for someone else's fault.
And this is really the core lesson for anyone in business. You can blame your employees, you can blame the economy, you can blame your software, but at the end of the day, you're the one writing the check. The only way to protect your wealth is to assume it's all on you from the very beginning.
So how do you actually start doing this? It's not like you can just flip a switch in your brain. The source gives us a really practical playbook for how to build this muscle over time, whether you're just starting out or you've been at this for a while.
If this is a totally new way of thinking for you, start right here. First, just make a list of everything you want. Then, right next to it, list all the excuses for why you don't have it yet. Now for the tough part. Look at those excuses and realize they are your responsibility. It's not that you don't have time, it's that you manage your time poorly. It's not that the market is bad, it's that your strategy isn't working. See the difference? Once you own the problem, you can actually create a plan to fix it.
Now, for those of you who've already started down this path, the strategy is a little different. It's more proactive. You have to get obsessed with what could go wrong. And this isn't about being negative, it's about being prepared. List out every potential disaster, create solutions for them in advance, and then, and this is so key, go ask your mentors what problems you haven't even thought of. This is how you protect what you've already built.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. This entire philosophy really just boils down to a single, really powerful choice about who's in charge of your life.
I think this quote from the source just sums it up perfectly. The world, your employees, the economy, they really don't care about your success. They will never, ever pay for the damage they cause you. And since you're the one who's going to have to fix it no matter what, you might as well accept the responsibility from the get-go.
And let's be crystal clear on this. The goal here is not to feel guilty or to beat yourself up. It is the exact opposite. This is about empowerment. Every single time you say, "This is my fault," what you're really doing is taking power away from random chance and other people, and you are giving that power back to yourself.
So, when with this question for you to think about. Who are you going to let control your future? Are you going to let it be random events, other people, and a world that doesn't care? Or are you going to decide that your future is your fault, and therefore it's entirely within your control?
All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to unpack a pretty powerful idea. The concept that the way you think, your fundamental mindset, might just be the biggest secret to your financial success. And that secret to building wealth? Well, it's probably not what you think it is.
So, I want to start with a quote from the source material for today's explainer that's probably going to sound, well, a little weird. I know. It's a strange way to kick off a conversation about money. But you gotta stick with me here because this unexpected starting point reveals an absolutely profound truth about how wealth is built.
And that really is the question, isn't it? What on earth does success in a social scene, like a bar, have to do with success in business or your finances? They seem like they're worlds apart. But as it turns out, the principles underneath are almost exactly the same.
See, the answer really boils down to two fundamental ways of seeing the world. Whether you're thinking about approaching someone for a date or approaching a new business venture, your odds of success are pretty much dictated by one of these two core mindsets.
So on the left, you've got the scarcity mindset. Just picture this person in a bar. They're awkward, they're nervous, and they're treating every single conversation like it's their one and only chance. They are absolutely terrified of rejection. Then, on the right, you've got the abundance mindset. This person is confident, they're calm. If one chat doesn't go anywhere, it's not a big deal at all. They just know there are tons of other people to connect with.
And here is the absolute key. That nervous, needy, desperate energy doesn't just push people away in a social setting. A scarcity mindset literally repels money. This belief that money is this finite thing, that it's super hard to get, and that any loss is a total catastrophe, well, that just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, so to make this a little more real, the source material breaks these mindsets down into 4 pretty distinct financial archetypes. As we walk through them, I want you to be honest with yourself and think, which one of these sounds a little bit like me?
So first up, we have an archetype called Mr. Never Takes Risks. And as you can probably guess from the name, this is the pure embodiment of a super scarcity mindset. This person's entire life is basically built around one thing: avoiding failure at all costs.
And this comparison is just perfect. In dating, their strategy is to say nothing offensive, but also nothing interesting. They're just average, totally unmemorable, because being memorable is risky. Now look how that perfectly mirrors their financial life. Get the safe job, never put money into anything even slightly risky, and just save, save, save until you die. And the result, a very modest, very average, and totally unmemorable financial life.
Okay, so if Mr. Never Takes Risks plays it safe, our next guy, Mr. Watch But Not Do, he doesn't even get in the game. This is an even more extreme version of scarcity, where the fear is so paralyzing that it just stops any action from happening at all.
You know this person at the bar. They're the one standing over in the corner just watching everybody else, criticizing people when they fail, but never, ever working up the courage to approach anyone themselves. Financially, this is the person who's convinced that becoming wealthy is just impossible for them. They're always thinking, oh, I don't have enough capital, or I don't have the right connections, so why even bother trying? They never start the business, they never make the investment, and they stay exactly where they are.
All right, now we're going to switch gears completely and move into the abundance mindset. We're starting with an archetype called Mr. Brute Force. This person is, well, they're a lot, but their whole way of thinking is fundamentally different from what we've seen so far. Mr. Brute Force is that guy at the bar who gets rejected by 20 people in a row, and he just doesn't care. He knows it's all a numbers game, and if he keeps swinging, eventually he'll get a hit. This is the exact mindset of the entrepreneur who fails 19 times but hits a home run and becomes a millionaire on their 20th try. They truly believe they have unlimited chances, and the worst-case scenario isn't failure, it's just having to start over.
And that brings us to our final and really the ideal archetype. This is what the source material calls Mr. Ladies' Man. This is what happens when that raw energy of abundance gets educated, refined, and a little bit smarter.
This person is just confident, they're having fun, they take risks, but they're calibrated risks. They understand people, they know not everyone is going to like them, and they are perfectly okay with that. Financially, this is the successful entrepreneur who just gets how money works. They believe money is basically limitless, so they aren't afraid to take the calculated risks you have to take to generate more of it. They understand the rules of the game.
So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I get it. Abundance is way better. But, and that but is probably the biggest, most powerful obstacle there is. So let's just address it directly.
I mean, this is the classic catch-22, isn't it? You're being told you need an abundance mindset to get abundance. But it's pretty hard to feel abundant when your bank account is empty. How in the world do you break out of that cycle?
Well, the solution isn't about pretending you're rich. It's not about faking it till you make it. The real mindset shift is about changing your daily focus. Instead of obsessing over how to save and protect every last penny, you switch your primary mental energy over to creation. Your main question every single day becomes, how can I make more money today?
Now, talking about a mindset shift is one thing, but actually making it happen is something else entirely. So let's break down some practical, actionable steps you can take, whether you're starting from zero or you already have some success under your belt.
If you're a newcomer, your focus has to be on generation. That means you can't be afraid to spend money on things that will help you make more money, like getting a certification for a raise, or buying educational tools, or getting the right software for your side hustle. Now, for the veterans out there, the folks who are already making good money, the trap is different. You have to avoid the temptation to just hoard it. Your focus must be on expansion, investing in your portfolio, growing your business, or buying other assets to make what you've built even bigger.
And this quote from our source really just sums it all up perfectly. A scarcity mindset keeps you stuck, static, afraid to make a move. But an abundance mindset is, by its very nature, about forward motion, about growth, about progress. Because when you only focus on protecting what you already have, you can never, ever create more.
Ultimately, you can't control market conditions, you can't control luck, and you can't control a million other things out in the world. But your mindset, that is 100% yours to control. So the real question isn't whether there's enough money out there for you. The real question is, what are you going to choose to believe about your ability to go out and get it?
Have you ever found yourself just stuck? So worried about all the things that could go wrong that you never even get started? Yeah, it's a super common trap. Today, we're going to dig into the huge difference between two ways of thinking, the what-if mindset versus the what-is mindset. And let me tell you, understanding this isn't just a minor adjustment. It's pretty much the bedrock of making any real progress in life. Let's get into it. So, to really unpack this, we're going to look at the story of two guys, Ben and Roy. They start in the exact same spot, same job, same everything, but their focus, totally different worlds. Ben's head is just swimming in a sea of what-ifs, all these potential problems. Roy, on the other hand, he's just looking at the one single problem that's right in front of him. And that one little difference, well, it changes absolutely everything. So picture this. Our story kicks off at a car dealership. Ben and Roy get hired on the very same day. They've got the same resume, same background, you name it. But their whole approach to the job could not be more different. And that's what makes this the perfect way to see why taking messy, imperfect action is always, always better than doing nothing perfectly. Okay, day one. If you just glanced at the sales numbers, you'd think it was a tie. 0 cars for Ben, 0 cars for Roy. But what was actually happening under the surface was totally different. Ben spent his whole day reading manuals and watching videos, basically preparing. He was terrified of making a mistake. But Roy? He just jumped right in. He tried to sell, he failed, a lot, and he went home that night to figure out what he did wrong. Now, day two is where you really see the split. Ben hears something on the news about a salesman getting sued, and bam, he spends his entire day researching this totally hypothetical problem that has nothing to do with him. Meanwhile, Roy takes the real lessons from his real failures on day one, tweaks his approach, and he sells his first car. And here you can see it plain as day, the immediate result of their actions. Ben is still sitting at a big, fat 0, totally paralyzed by a what-if fear. But Roy? Roy's on the board. He did something, he learned something, and he got a real result. It's only 1 car, sure, but that's how momentum begins. On the third day, that little gap starts to look like a canyon. After that first sale, Roy realized, okay, my new problem is negotiation. So he learns about it, and then he immediately goes and uses it. Ben, on the other hand, is still stuck in theory land. He's walking around asking other people for negotiation tips, but he still hasn't even talked to a real customer. And whoa, would you look at that jump? Roy's sales literally quadruple. This is what we mean by compounding experience. Every action, every tiny failure, every lesson just stacks on top of the last one. Ben is still tying his shoes at the starting line while Roy is picking up speed. Day 4, and now a real problem hits. Roy messes up with a customer and has to give a refund. Ben sees this happen, and it just confirms all his fears. So he spends his entire day memorizing every single detail of every car on the lot to avoid a mistake he hasn't even come close to making. And Roy? He apologizes to the customer, learns a valuable lesson, and gets right back out there. And look, the numbers just keep going up for Roy. He literally proved that even a real setback, an actual mistake, can't stop you if you're focused on action. It's just another piece of data for him. Meanwhile, Ben is still in his imaginary classroom with a perfect record of 0 mistakes and 0 sales. So, what's the final score at the end of the week? Well, it's pretty brutal. Ben, the guy who made 0 mistakes, also sold 0 cars, and he was fired. Roy, the guy who failed and messed up and had to deal with angry people, sold 11 cars. He was already on the fast track to being the star of the dealership. You know, Ben's story isn't really just about selling cars, is it? It's about this mental trap, this thing that so many of us fall into, and it actually has a name. Just knowing what to call it is the first step to beating it. This is exactly what Ben was dealing with. Perfection, paralysis. And maybe this sounds a little familiar to you. It's that feeling of being so obsessed with getting everything perfect, so worried about every tiny thing that could go wrong, that you just don't do anything. You're frozen. Think about it like this. It's like a hockey player who wants to be great. He can read every book on strategy, watch 1,000 hours of game footage, but if he never, ever gets on the ice and actually shoots the puck, none of it matters. Progress is impossible without actually doing the thing. So this brings us to a kind of weird but really powerful idea. We need to stop being afraid of mistakes. In fact, we should almost try to make them faster. Because it turns out, making mistakes is the quickest way to figure things out and actually succeed. Because, look, here's the absolute truth. Getting something wrong, yeah, it stings a little, but it gives you information. The single worst thing you can possibly do when you're trying to achieve something is nothing. Inaction is a guaranteed fail. Making a mistake at least gives you a chance to learn. So we need to completely redefine what a mistake is. It's not a failure. It's not a sign you should quit. From now on, think of a mistake as a lesson that will make you money in the future. Every single slip-up is an investment in your own education. It's tuition for the school of success. Okay, that all sounds great, right? But how do you actually do it? When you're feeling that fear, that paralysis, how do you break out of it? Well, the trick is pretty clever. You fight fear with an even bigger fear. Here's how this little mental judo move works. You take that small, immediate fear that's holding you back, something like, what if my first business fails? And you put it in the ring with a much, much scarier fear. For example, what if I never even try, and I'm stuck in this job I hate, and I'm poor for the rest of my life? Now, which one of those is actually scarier? And the reason this works so well is just basic human psychology. We are fundamentally wired to work harder to avoid pain than we are to achieve pleasure. That fear of a painful, regretful life is a way, way more powerful engine than the nice idea of maybe succeeding one day. Okay, enough theory. Let's make this super practical. How can you use this idea right now, today? Here is a dead simple system you can use to cut through all the noise and just get started. It's just 4 steps. First, identify your one simple problem. Not some huge thing like build an empire, but something tiny like I need to get 1 client. Second, what's the one skill you need for that? Maybe it's selling. Third, pick 3 immediate actions, and I mean actions, not research. Things like cold call 10 people or send 5 emails. And finally, this is the secret sauce. You wrap it all up in an action paragraph. A little mantra you can say to yourself to keep you focused only on what is and shut down all those what ifs. So, this whole story, this entire idea, it all really boils down to one last, really powerful question. This is the ultimate what if, the one that should be driving every single thing you do from this point forward. Just let that sink in for a second. We spend so much of our lives wondering, what if I do this? What if I don't do that? But the only time you get the real, final answers to all those questions is on your last day. On that day, you'll know exactly what would have happened if you never took that chance. And that, right there, is why the most terrifying question in the world isn't what if I fail? It's looking back at your life, at all the things you didn't do, and having to ask the one question you can't get an answer to anymore. What could have happened? Don't let that be your final what if. You know that feeling when you have this huge goal, something that could totally change your life, but you have absolutely no clue where to even start? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how you can turn those big, fuzzy dreams into a real, step-by-step plan that you can actually get started on, like today. So, to really get the power of a good plan, think about this kind of crazy question. How is it that companies like Amazon or Twitter back in the day could be worth billions of dollars before they ever made a single dollar in profit? The answer? It's pretty simple. Investors could see they had a solid long-term plan. They weren't just wishing for success, they were literally building the train tracks to get there, piece by piece. And that feeling, that's what we're talking about here. It's the goal-setting gap. Let's call it the traffic fighter problem, right? You're stuck in the traffic jam of life, dreaming about being famous or wealthy or starting that amazing business, but you don't have a map. It feels so huge, so overwhelming that you just sit there. You never even turn the key. And it all comes down to 2 completely different ways of thinking. The traffic fighter mindset, it only sees the finish line, that one big, shiny success event, and it looks like one impossible jump. But the multimillionaire mindset, that sees hundreds of little, doable steps, a whole chain of micro-actions that add up. One way of thinking leaves you completely stuck, while the other builds this incredible, unstoppable momentum. It's so easy to fall for this, but focusing only on that success event is a total trap. It makes success look like some kind of lucky break, like winning the lottery. But what you don't see is the giant iceberg of hard work and planning and failure that's sitting right below the surface. You miss the most important part of the whole thing, the process. All right, so how do we actually make that shift? How do we go from being the traffic fighter to having a mindset that really gets things done? Let's dig into how multimillionaires actually structure their thinking to get these massive results. Okay, so this is the core philosophy right here. That big success isn't just one thing that happens. It's the end result of a long chain of smaller actions. For people who succeed, it's not about luck. It's a planned outcome. And here's the part you really got to get. The plan, the map itself, is often more important than the destination, because a good plan is what makes the goal possible in the first place. And the best part? There's a simple, repeatable recipe for creating that plan. It's a 3-step process you can use for literally any goal you have. First, you define it. Second, you break it down. And third, you create actual concrete action steps. Let's walk through it together. All right, let's dive into step 1, which is maybe the most critical part of this whole thing, defining your goal. And this isn't just about what you want. It's about getting super, super clear on the details, especially what it's all going to cost. You know those vague goals we all have, like, I want to be rich or I want a cool lifestyle? Well, for planning, they're just not going to cut it. Instead, you've got to do what's called a lifestyle calculation. I mean, get really specific. What kind of house do you want? What city? What car are you driving? What kind of vacations are you taking? You can go online, find the real prices for everything, and just add it all up. And boom, you do the math, and suddenly, the lifestyle you just designed costs $5 million. All of a sudden, being rich isn't some fuzzy dream anymore. It's a number. It's a real target. And that is a huge step because, how can you ever hit a target you can't even see? Now, this is where it gets real. We take that number and we combine it with a business idea. So for our example, let's say it's a supplement company. At $47 a bottle, you can do some quick math and figure out exactly how many bottles you need to sell to hit your goal. Just look at that. We went from a vague wish to a defined mathematical business objective. Now that is a goal you can actually start working on. Okay. Selling over 100,000 bottles of protein powder, that's still a huge, kind of scary number. So this is where the magic really happens. We deconstruct it. We take that one massive goal and we chop it up into several smaller, way more manageable projects. So for our protein powder business, you could break it down into, say, 5 big chunks like these. Now, each one is still a pretty big project, right? But they are so much less intimidating than that $5 million number. You're not asking, how do I make millions anymore? Now you're asking, how do I develop a protein powder? And that's a question you can actually find an answer to. All right, and now for the final piece of the puzzle. And honestly, this is the most powerful part. We take each one of those 5 smaller goals and we break them down even further into a simple, straightforward to-do list, a list of action steps. So let's just take that first mini goal, develop the product. What does that actually mean? Well, first, you'd probably research the process online. Then you could go ask potential customers, CrossFitters, what they're actually looking for. You could pick up the phone and call manufacturers to get quotes, and then you'd figure out how to get the startup money. See, each of these is a concrete action you can take, like right now. So let's just pause for a second and look at the incredible transformation that's happened here. This simple 3-step process takes you from being a dreamer stuck in traffic to a doer who has a clear destination and a real map to get there. This is the shift. Think about it. Before, you had a vague want, and you felt totally overwhelmed by it. But after this process, you have a defined map and a clear path forward. You've gone from that fuzzy dream of, I want a cool lifestyle, to knowing that your very next concrete step is to pick up the phone and call a manufacturer. That's the difference between just wishing for something and actually achieving it. I absolutely love this analogy from the source material because it's just so perfect. Before, trying to reach your goal was like trying to paint a masterpiece with just a vague description in your head. It's almost impossible. But now you have a paint-by-number blueprint. All you have to do is follow the steps, fill in the colors one by one, and that amazing picture is gonna emerge. At the end of the day, this whole thing isn't about magic. It's just about getting clear. You've taken what felt like an impossible mountain, and you've turned it into a clear, step-by-step path. You've basically laid out the entire train track, and it leads directly to your destination. So the only real question left for you is, what's your first step? What if I told you that you could seriously increase your income just by making one simple shift in your mindset? Well, it's all about focusing on the one thing that actually truly puts money in your pocket. So let's break down exactly how this works. To really get our heads around this, we're going to start with a thought experiment. Now, it's going to sound a little ridiculous at first, I'll admit, but trust me, the lesson it teaches is incredibly real and valuable. Just imagine this. Picture a world where every single time you ran 1 mile, $1,000 magically appears in your bank account. Boom, just like that. You run a mile, $1,000. Another mile, another 1,000. It sounds pretty amazing, right? But of course, there are a couple of rules to this game. First, you've only got a strict 8-hour workday to make your money, and here's the real kicker. Any time you spend preparing to run, shopping for gear, cooking meals, stretching, all of that comes directly out of those precious 8 hours. So, with those rules in mind, let me ask you a question. What is the single most important action you should be doing all day, every single day, to make the absolute most money in this scenario? Now, the obvious answer is just run, right? Run as fast and as far as you can. And you're not wrong, but that's not the whole story. See, there's a hidden trap here that almost everyone falls into. And believe me, it is a very, very expensive one. That trap? We can call it your $1 million distraction. These are all those tasks that seem productive, that even feel necessary, but are secretly costing you an absolute fortune in lost opportunity. Think of it this way. Your activities fall into 2 buckets. In one bucket, you have the action that actually makes you money, running. And in the other bucket, you have all the prep work, the cooking, the shopping, setting up your water bottles. These things don't just not make you money, they actively steal time away from when you could be earning. They're what we call income stealers. Let's actually put a number on this, because it's pretty shocking. If you spend just 30 minutes a day on that prep work, assuming you could run a decent 5-minute mile, you are losing out on the chance to earn $6,000 every single day. Over a year, that adds up to over $1 million in lost income. That's just how devastating these little distractions can be. So, what's the solution? Well, it's actually beautifully simple. First, you have to identify the single activity that gets you paid, in this case, running. Step 2, you ruthlessly delegate everything else that can possibly be done by someone else. You hire someone to cook your food, to set up your water. The tiny cost of that is nothing compared to the massive income you get back. Okay, enough with the running analogy, right? How does this actually apply to the real world? Let's take a look at how to find your highest return on investment action in an actual business. So what is a high ROI action? It's pretty simple. It's one of the very, very few things, we're talking maybe 1 to 3 activities, that will directly result in a client writing you a check or a customer clicking that buy button. It's not the learning, it's not the preparing, it's the final act of getting paid. Let's take a look at a real-world example. We'll call her Amy. She's starting a marketing business, and her goal is to hit her first $10,000 a month. Her to-do list looks super productive, right? Reading books, practicing SEO, learning ads, building a website. But if you look closely, only one of those things, cold calling and emailing potential clients, directly leads to someone giving her money. That means every other item on that list, even though it feels like hard work, is an income stealer. Reading another book isn't going to land her a client today. Building a perfect website with no one to show it to doesn't generate a dime of revenue. These tasks are actually preventing her from spending time on the one thing that will get her to her goal. And this brings us to such a core idea, which the source material puts perfectly. You will be learning far more from doing than you will ever learn from learning about doing. Action isn't just the best teacher, it's the only one that pays the bills. But here's the next critical piece of this whole puzzle. The very actions that make you successful in the beginning can become the exact things that hold you back from reaching the next level. What got you here won't get you there. And this is exactly what happens to Amy. She grinds it out, she makes the call, she sends the emails, and bam, she hits her goal of $10,000 a month. Awesome. But now her new goal is $100,000 a month, and just doing more of the same, it's not working. She's completely plateaued. So what does she do? She reevaluates. She breaks down her entire sales process, and she actually calculates the value of her time for each step. The cold calls, the emails, the follow-ups, they all lead to the final step. But it's those closing meetings right at the bottom where she's generating $500 per hour. That is her new highest ROI action. And with that realization, the new plan becomes crystal clear. Her old money-making activities, the cold calls and emails that got her started, are now her new low-value tasks. She needs to hire a team to do all of that for her, which frees her up to spend 100% of her time in those $500 an hour closing meetings. And this cycle of identifying your highest value action, focusing on it, and delegating the rest, this is the fundamental time hack used by the wealthiest, most successful people on the planet. They just do it at a massive, massive scale. Because let's be honest with ourselves, you are only one person. There is a hard cap on what any single person can accomplish in a day, no matter how hard you work. You can only run so many miles by yourself. Unless, of course, you are in control of a giant business robot. Just think of your team, your employees, your freelancers, your systems, as a giant machine that you get to direct. By yourself, you're just you, but by controlling the machine, you can push over a skyscraper. And you see this principle everywhere at the top. Mark Zuckerberg isn't coding anymore. His time is best spent leading thousands of developers, multiplying his decisions 1,000-fold. Warren Buffett isn't running a single corner store. He's investing in and guiding hundreds of companies at once, getting hundreds of times the reward for his time. That right there is the incredible power of leverage. Your team multiplies the impact and the reach of every single high-level decision you make. Directing them becomes your new highest ROI action, because every minute you spend doing that results in hundreds of hours of productive work getting done. So this all brings us back to the final crucial question you have to ask yourself, and you have to be brutally honest about it. When you really look at what moves the needle versus what just feels productive, what's your running? What is your one thing? All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a pretty wild idea about wealth. The idea that the real currency isn't what's in your wallet, but the people all around you. So, let's dive in. So let's just jump right in with a statement that's designed to stop you in your tracks. Money is not real. I mean, think about it. If you were the last person on Earth, what good would $1 billion do you? It's just paper, right? Or numbers on a screen. Its power has to come from somewhere else. So, if it's not real, what is money? Well, at its core, it's really just a tool for exchanging power. It's a social contract, you know? It's this thing that lets you get other people to do stuff for you, like build your house or fly a salmon across the country for your dinner. The only reason it works is because we all collectively agree that it does. And this is the absolute key takeaway. Chasing money is kind of like chasing a shadow. The real source of wealth, the thing that gives money its power in the first place, is understanding people. So if you want to get rich, the goal isn't just to pile up a bunch of paper. No. The real goal is to get good at understanding and influencing other human beings. Okay, so this leads us to the first big idea from our source. The wealthiest people out there, they're not always the most popular or the most liked. No, they're the ones who are total masters at understanding what makes people tick. And this is where it gets really interesting. Check this out. Being liked, that'll get you compliments. But being understood, that's what gets you customers. That's what gets you money. The source brings up Steve Jobs. I mean, let's be real, he wasn't exactly famous for being Mr. Nice Guy, but he understood what people wanted on this deep gut level, often before they even knew it themselves. That's how you build an empire. And this just hammers home a super important point. You can't get rich by yourself. It's literally impossible. I mean, who actually built the iPhone? Who wrote the code? Who designed the marketing campaigns? Who worked in the factories? And, maybe most importantly, who lined up around the block to buy it? The answer is always other people. Success is a team sport. Okay, so we've established that understanding people is the foundation. But what's the bridge? How do you connect that understanding to actual, profit? How do you turn that insight into cold, hard cash? Well, according to our source material, yeah, lots of skills matter, but there's one, just one, that stands head and shoulders above the rest as the direct path to creating wealth. And that skill is selling. And look, we're not talking about the slimy, pushy, used car salesman kind of selling. We're talking about selling as the art of persuasion. It's the ability to get another person to give you their money and actually feel good about it. Think about it. When you really get good at selling, which is basically just applied psychology, everything else in business just clicks into place. It gets so much easier. You know how to write ads that work, you know how to close deals, and you know how to frame your offer so it feels irresistible. Look, you can totally hire people for the technical stuff. the coding, the manufacturing, all that. But, and this is a big but, the source is super clear on this. If you're the founder, the one with the vision, you absolutely have to be the best seller in the room. Nobody else has your passion, and nobody understands the problem you solve better than you do.
All right, let's take this up a notch, because this isn't just about selling a thing anymore. This is about building a brand that people remember, a brand that becomes legendary.
Here's the real divide. Mediocre entrepreneurs, they sell products. The wildly successful ones, the greats, they sell emotions. They get that at the end of the day, we're all driven by how we feel. I mean, just look at this table. It tells the whole story, doesn't it? You're not buying an iPhone just for the processor speed, right? You're buying it to feel cool, to feel connected. You're not buying Starbucks just for the caffeine. You're buying a feeling of comfort, of community. Red Bull doesn't sell a drink. It sells adventure and adrenaline. That's the master level of understanding people.
So this all sounds great, but how do you actually do it? How do you put it into practice? Luckily, our source lays out a pretty clear game plan, and it's different depending on where you are on your journey.
So if you're just starting out, listen up. The biggest thing holding you back probably isn't what you think. It's not a lack of knowledge, it's just plain old fear. It's that urge to hide behind your laptop and just hope that customers magically show up. But we already know that's not how wealth is built.
So here's what you got to do. 2 things. First, learn the theory. Read the books, watch the courses, understand the mechanics of selling. But second, and this is the important one, you have to get out there and practice. You have to, and I mean have to, put yourself in those situations that make you sweat a little. Make the cold call, go to the networking event. It's going to be awkward at first, for sure, but it is the only way you're going to grow.
Okay, but what if you're not a beginner? What if you're already in the game? You've already had some success. Well, now is the time to kind of step back and look at your business from a whole new angle. Are you just selling a product, or are you truly connecting with people on an emotional level?
First, let's talk vision, the big picture stuff. Ask yourself, and be brutally honest, are you the coolest, most interesting solution on the market? Are people actually passionate about what you do? What do you stand for beyond just making a profit? And here's a big one. Would you want to be your own customer? And then you got to get tactical. Look at your actual marketing. Is it just a boring list of features, or is it telling a story? Is it making people feel something? Do you really, truly know who your ideal customer is? And is your company actually fun to do business with? And you know what? This brings us full circle, right back to where we started. Getting rich is never a solo mission. It is always, always a transaction between people, a transfer of value, power, and belief. So maybe the ultimate question isn't, how can I make more money? Maybe it's, how can I get way, way better at understanding and serving other people? Because if you can crack that code, well, the money's going to take care of itself. Let's talk about what might just be the most powerful and honestly the most overlooked life hack for getting wealthy. No, it's not about picking the right stock or finding some secret real estate deal. It's about the people you talk to every single day. And the secret to unlocking this power? Well, it's hidden in a place you would never, ever expect. I know, it sounds a little nuts, right? But stick with me here, because the key to unlocking an almost obsessive level of motivation is actually hidden inside one of the most addictive video games ever made. Just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, look at this number, 14 million. At its absolute peak, the online game World of Warcraft had 14 million paying subscribers. That's millions of people who were completely and totally hooked. The real question is, why? What was going on? So to really understand the power of this social cheat code, we first have to step into the world of Warcraft and figure out why millions of people were willing to spend thousands and thousands of hours inside this digital universe. Okay, so the goal in the game was actually pretty simple. Get stronger, find better gear, and level up your character. But the effort it took, it was absolutely insane. We're talking months of playing 8 to 10 hours a day, basically a full-time job. Now, most of us can't get ourselves to dedicate that kind of obsessive focus to our real-life goals. Yet millions of people did it for a game. What was the trigger? Well, it turns out the game's creators, maybe even by accident, stumbled onto a fundamental psychological trigger that drives this incredible motivation. And the best part? You can totally use it in your own life. And there it is. That's the secret sauce right there. It wasn't just about the game itself. It was the community.
See, when you're surrounded by people who are all chasing the exact same thing, it just ignites this competitive fire inside you to not just keep up, but to get ahead. And this whole thing works because at our core, we're pack animals. It's just baked into our DNA. We have this deep, deep-seated need to be recognized and respected by our group. So we instinctively start to act like the people we spend the most time with, all so we can fit in and feel like we belong. So how do we apply this? It's actually pretty simple. You have to intentionally build a social circle, your pack, that pulls you towards your goals, not one that holds you back. Just think about the difference for a second. If your friends just want to sit around watching reality TV and have zero interest in talking business, you're not going to feel much of a push to improve, right? You're already on their level. But what if your circle is full of people who are always talking about success, always competing to get better? You'll feel this powerful subconscious pull to level up right there with them. It really just boils down to this timeless piece of advice. You've heard it a million times, but it is so incredibly true. The people you surround yourself with will either be your greatest asset or your heaviest anchor, and that choice is entirely yours. And this gets to the really powerful part: how to use the emotions that come with all this competition. Look, when a friend in your group has a big win, you might feel a little pang of jealousy. Don't let that become poison. A true winner, somebody like Michael Jordan, he was famous for taking the anger from a loss and using it as fuel to work 10 times harder. You can use those emotions as motivation. Okay, so competitive friends are absolutely crucial for that day-to-day motivation. But there's another piece to the success puzzle. To really, really accelerate your progress, you need a guide. Think of it this way. Trying to get wealthy all on your own is like walking through a minefield blindfolded. I mean, sure, you'll probably make some progress, but you're going to step on a lot of mines along the way. A mentor is someone who has already crossed that field. They can just hand you the map. They know the cheat codes.
But here's the thing, not just any mentor will do, and this is a really common mistake people make. So let me ask you, would you ask Wayne Gretzky, maybe the greatest hockey player of all time, to teach a total beginner how to skate?
Of course not. He's so far beyond the basics, he's probably forgotten what it's even like to be a beginner. His advice is for other elite players, and his time is way too valuable to spend teaching someone how to just stand up on the ice. The exact same thing is true in business. The key then is finding a suitable mentor. This is someone who's just a few steps ahead of you, maybe making about 10 times what you are. They were in your shoes recently enough that their advice is still super relevant and actually actionable for where you are right now. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do it? Let's get practical. Let's break down the actual steps to building your own high-growth pack. So, here's your first quest. It's simple. Start by just diving into as many free online communities in your field as you can find. Then, pay attention. Identify the people who are really leading the conversations, the ones who know what they're talking about. Next, do a little digging and find out where they hang out, because it's almost always in paid, higher-level groups. And that's your final step. Invest in joining one of those. That is the fastest way to find both your competitive friends and your suitable mentors all in one place. Because when you strip everything else away, it all comes down to a simple, fundamental truth about human nature. We learn, we grow, we become who we are by copying the people around us. Our language, our habits, our ambitions, they're all reflections of the people we choose to surround ourselves with. So, I'll leave you with one final and really powerful question. Take an honest look at your social circle, at your mentors, at the communities you're a part of. Who are you choosing to mimic? Because the answer to that question, well, that's going to determine your future. You know, we're always told that success is all about hard work, smart strategies, networking, all that stuff. But what if those things are just secondary? What if becoming truly wealthy actually comes down to one single hidden element? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on that exact idea. All right, let's just dive right in with a pretty tough pill to swallow from our source. A whopping 90% of people who start reading a book never finish it. Just think about that for a second. This has nothing to do with being smart. It's all about commitment. It's about seeing something through to the end. So why? Why does this happen? Well, the author doesn't pull any punches with the explanation. See, people say they want success, but very few actually have the stomach for the real grind it takes to get there. They just don't have that backbone to push through when it gets hard. And hey, it's not just about books, right? Take a look at weight loss. An incredible 95.6% of people who try to lose a serious amount of weight fail to keep it off. I mean, even when you have huge motivators like your own health and confidence on the line, that follow-through just fizzles out. So when you look at these numbers, you can see why the author comes to a pretty bleak conclusion. If we can't even finish a book or stick to a health goal, what does that say about our chances of achieving something as massive as building real wealth? I mean, statistically, it kind of looks like the game is rigged against us. That all sounds pretty hopeless, doesn't it? It feels like we're just fighting a losing battle against the numbers. But hold on a second. This is where the whole argument takes a sharp turn. Is it really about the odds, or is there something bigger going on here? Before you get too down about those stats, I want you to consider a completely different one. 1 in 100 million. You know what those were? Those were the odds against you just to exist. That was the chance that the one specific sperm that made you actually won the race. I mean, really let that sink in. Your very existence is a flat-out statistical miracle. You beat out 100 million other competitors to be here. Before you even took your first breath, you were the ultimate underdog who had already won an impossible lottery. And just to put that into perspective for you, winning the lottery is like a 1 in 14 million shot. You did something way, way more unlikely than that just by showing up. So you're not defined by statistics. You are living, breathing proof that you can absolutely shatter them. Okay, so this idea leads us to a really powerful new way of thinking. If you've already conquered odds that are basically impossible, then failure can't just be about some random statistic, right? It's got to be something else. And here it is. This is the core of the whole argument. Failure is not something that just happens to you. It's not bad luck. It's not a roll of the dice. From this point of view, failure is an internal decision. It is a choice you make. Now, the author uses some, let's just say, very memorable language to get this point across. The idea is there's no outside force, no statistic ninja that's enforcing failure on you. Nobody is physically standing in your way. And the analogy just keeps going. Just like there's no ninja, there's no wealthy Batman out there actively sabotaging your shot at success. The real roadblocks we hit aren't these external bad guys. They're the battles we fight inside our own heads. So here's what it all boils down to. When the going gets tough, when the work becomes a grind, people are faced with a choice. And most people choose to back down. They retreat to what's comfortable. They actively choose to become another number in that statistic because failing is just the easier path. So, if failure is a choice, you know what that means, right? It means success has to be a choice too. And that brings us to the solution, that secret element we talked about at the beginning. The author calls it the 11th pillar. And this is it. This is the big one, the one single pillar that has to be in place before anything else even matters. It's not a wish, it's not a hope. It's a clear, conscious, and totally unshakable decision that you will become wealthy, no matter what it takes. And look, this isn't some quiet little decision you make to yourself. No, this is a defiant roar. It's the kind of mindset that screams, you will not be stopped. Not by stats, not by obstacles, not by logic, not by anything. It's a full-on declaration of war on mediocrity. So when do you make a decision this big? The answer is simple. Right now. Not tomorrow, not when you've saved up some money, not when the time feels right, because the power of this decision is in its immediacy. Waiting is just another word for procrastinating. And listen, this next part is maybe the most crucial piece of the whole puzzle. This isn't a one and done kind of thing. The world is going to throw 1,000,001 reasons at you every single day to quit. So every morning, you have to wake up and make that decision all over again. You have to recommit. All right, let's stop just talking about this idea and actually make it real. Let's turn this abstract concept into a concrete action. It's time for you to make your final commitment. It's really this simple. But it's also this powerful. Not, I hope to, not, I'll try to. It's a statement of fact. You are declaring what your future is going to be. I will become wealthy. Look at this. This is your contract with yourself. So do it right now. I don't care if it's in your head or on a real piece of paper. Write down those words. Sign your name. Put today's date on it. Make it real. And as you're doing that, I want you to remember something really important. Every single self-made wealthy person on this planet had a moment just like this one. A moment where they were just fed up and they finally made the decision. The only thing that separates you from them right now is this final pillar, this commitment.
So it all comes down to this, right here, right now. Forget about the stats. Forget about every time you've failed before. None of that matters anymore. The only question is, what will you decide right now?
Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to break down a strategic roadmap for building a business, one that's all about minimizing your personal risk while, really maximizing your chances for massive success.
I mean, who hasn't dreamed of being their own boss, right? Building something from the ground up, something that's really yours, and achieving that financial freedom we all hear about. It's a super powerful idea for sure. But here's the thing that stops almost everyone, that fear of failure. The thought of pouring your life savings into an idea that might just fizzle out, it's terrifying. But what if there was a way to chase that dream without betting the farm? Well, the source material we're diving into today lays out a path to do exactly that. Okay, let's get right into it. The first step, and this is absolutely critical, is to understand that not all businesses are created equal. Our source breaks them down into 3 totally distinct archetypes. And knowing the difference is the real key to the whole strategy. So first up, you've got what are called cash flow or CF businesses. Think of it like this. You're selling a skill or a service directly. The startup costs are practically zero, and your profit margins can be huge. The catch? Well, your income is directly tied to your time. You are the business, which makes it pretty tough to scale up. Then you've got the big players, high investment, scalable, or HIS businesses. These are the ones you always hear about, the software companies, the viral apps. They take a ton of money to get started, and they can lose money for years, but the potential payoff is astronomical. They're built for massive growth and can eventually be sold for a fortune because, well, they don't need you to run them. And rounding out our trio, we have long-term investment, or LTI businesses. Now, this is a totally different ballgame. This is about buying an asset that already exists. Think real estate or a successful franchise. You need a lot of cash up front, but the goal here is completely different. Safe, steady, and totally passive income. Okay, so when you lay it all out like this, it becomes super clear, right? You can really see the trade-offs. A cash flow business gives you that immediate profit with almost no risk. A high investment business, well, it offers that massive scale, but it comes with huge risk. And a long-term business is all about safety, but only if you've already got a big pile of cash to play with. Getting this is crucial for what comes next. So with all that said, where on earth do you start? Well, the source material is crystal clear on this point. You start with a cash flow business. This becomes your foundation. This is your cash engine. And listen, this quote from the source just hits the nail on the head. Jumping straight into that huge, scalable idea before you're ready, it's like trying to walk a tightrope for the very first time, with no safety net. It's an incredibly risky move that, let's be honest, almost never works out. Okay, so what does that actually look like? What are some good places to begin? The source lays out 3 really fantastic, super low-risk online businesses. You could try affiliate marketing. You're just earning commissions selling stuff other people made. Or you could create an online course or an ebook selling your own knowledge. Or hey, you could just offer a skill you already have, like marketing or consulting, as a service. All of these are perfect ways to build up cash and experience without putting yourself on the line. All right, so imagine you've done it. Your cash flow business is humming along, bringing in a nice, steady profit. You're ready for the next stage. And at this point, you're not just earning a living anymore. You're building the fuel for something much, much bigger. And this, my friends, is where the strategy gets really cool. This is the growth rocket stage. You take the profits, and just as important, the experience from your little CF business, and you pour them into a high-investment, scalable business. You see what's happening? You're using your business's money to invest, not your own. Your personal risk just dropped dramatically. And you see, this slide shows a total shift in how you think. The goal is no longer about you trading your time for money. No. The goal now is to build a system, a machine that can serve thousands of customers, run completely without you, and in the end, be sold for a truly life-changing amount of money. So let's fast forward. You've built your rocket, you've launched it, and you've sold it for a massive payday. You've had a huge win? What now? Well, this is the endgame. This is where you build a fortress of wealth that's designed to last forever. Let's put some real numbers on this, using a great example from the source material. Let's say you sell your company for, $15 million. Instead of just going on a massive spending spree, you put that money to work for you. And this is where your jaw might just hit the floor. This is the power of those LTI businesses. By investing that $15 million into assets like apartment buildings that kick off a 15% return, you could be generating over $2 million a year in completely passive income. And your original $15 million? It's still there, safe and sound. That is how you create generational wealth. Okay, let's pull it all together and look at the whole roadmap, from start to finish. As you can see, this isn't about taking some wild, crazy gamble. It's a clear, logical, and strategic path from your very first dollar all the way to lasting financial freedom. And this right here, this is the whole strategy in a nutshell. It's a 3-stage process. 1, build your cash engine. 2, use that cash to build a sellable asset, your growth rocket. And 3, convert that asset into a fortress of passive, permanent wealth. This lets you take smart, calculated risks without ever really risking the farm. So there you have it. The map is in your hands. And the beautiful thing about it is that the journey doesn't start with some huge, terrifying leap of faith. It starts with one small, safe step. So the only question left is, what's your first move going to be? What skill of yours can you turn into that first cash engine?